Good afternoon. I am Leon Davis, and this is Altitude Adjustment. I want to thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. It is Saturday, November the 24th at 2 p.m. And today's topic, well, let me say first, there were several tragedies for the past week. And as always, my best goes out to those people involved and the people that support those people involved. One I want to draw particular attention to this week is the fires in California. I want to make mention that we as inhabitants need to be extremely careful about taking care of the planet that we've inherited, as it is, as we know, the only place that we can live at this particular time. So that's pretty important. This week's podcast is going to be about role models. Now, a note on that is last week I was supposed to do this podcast about role models, and I was doing it remotely. I have I developed a relationship with the owner of Miss Piggies Smokehouse, and she has allowed me, or they have allowed me, to do my podcast from their facility. And so last week I had an opportunity to learn quite a few lessons, and I was not quite as successful as I'd like to have been getting that podcast done. And so I'm having to redo that podcast this week, and that's coming up right now. Welcome to Altitude Adjustment. Okay, so now just for grins, the definition of a role model is a person looked to by others as an example to be imitated. Now, that has become significant to me over the past years. Normally, when I think of role models, and I'm guessing that most people it's the same way, when you think of a role model, you think of something that for children or to look up to emulate, if they're in an environment where they're not, having access to successful people, that it gives them an opportunity to see what behavior is important for success. It gives them a broader idea of how to behave. So you grow up in a household, and there are things that you learn in the household, and there are things that are important in every other person's household that you may not get necessarily access to immediately, but role models allow for you or children or people to experience or see other behaviors that will help them to develop into better, well-rounded people. Now, as I mentioned, role models, when I mention the term role models, most people would probably immediately go to children, something for children. And we don't hear a lot about role models recently. But again, I don't work with children so much on a regular level, so I'm not going to be exposed to that. But there are role models that are necessary for adults. And the last couple of years have really opened my eyes to that. So one of the things I think it's important is recognizing how a role model is important for adults. And you would think that adults have an understanding of what behavior is acceptable and what behavior is unacceptable and how to present themselves. And it has come to my attention that that expectation may not be, it's not shared. And we have taken for granted for so long, we've had people in the role of the president who have pretty much lived up to a particular code of behavior during my lifetime. So I can't speak to, I know there are presidents who have had challenges to being what we consider presidential, but during my lifetime, all of the presidents that I have encountered at least had some level of behavior or decorum that I could recognize. Now, this is not an attempt to bash the current president. It is just to examine the role of a a president or the role of a person or a leader who has the public forum, who has all of the attention spotlight shined on them and their behavior and how that affects society in general. And so the current occupant of the White House has a different idea of adult behavior, has a different idea of how to proceed to get things done. And I think I've mentioned this in a different podcast that some people see process over, or I'm sorry, see it jumped right out of my mind. They see results over process. And I think that they go together. To me, process and results go together. Just getting things done is not just the best way to do things, because if you leave in your wake a lot of destruction and hard feelings and anger and animosity, just getting the job done, what have you done for the long term? So you've built up resentment in all of the people that you stepped on or all the people that you've trampled to get things done. And so the results may be short-lived because people have a tendency to sometimes push back simply, even though the results were good, they did not like the process by which the results were achieved. And that's important. And it's difficult to say, well, they should just knuckle under and accept it because the results were what they wanted. And actually, the results are only a part of what they wanted. The process is just as important to people because it gives them a buy-in. It gives them ownership of the results. So if the results get done and other people don't feel a part of the process, then the results aren't not as effective, and you really didn't do the job. So it is important for people, or for us as a society, to have role models in positions, so to reinforce what we see as acceptable and ideal behavior in a society. We don't want adults every time they get angry to lash out. That is unproductive because it creates this tension where people push back against each other and they force the other person in trying to get the results that they want to drag people into getting things done, or pushing or bullying people to get things done. And then keep in mind, there's usually more than one way to get things done, and usually more ways to see results of things. And when you use brute force, you are saying to the people around you, or the people that you're trying to work through or work around or work over to get these results, that they're insignificant, that they are not important enough to be considered in getting the job done. And that the only way to get the job done is for me to force my way or force my ideas or my processes on you to get the results I want, regardless of what your part in this is. So if a president, and I'm just taking this as an example because it's in the news, and I think it's an example that can register, is that a president tries to accomplish something. I mean, so Congress has its tasks, or it has its priorities outlined, and the president has theirs, and then there has to be some overlap, and they have to work with each other to get things done. If a president uses brute force all the time, in some cases, I'm guessing that there are the need to be forceful in how you present your case and moving things along is necessary, but it can't be in all cases. In all cases, when you use brute force, you are going to create animosities and you're going to create backlash. And it may not come up in that negotiation. It may not come up in that particular situation, but it will come up somewhere down the line. It won't go away. It does not just disappear when you beat and badger and bully your way into your results. It will come back. And so when the president is trying to work to achieve something, one of the things that I've always found in a president is finding some way to, and I'm not saying it's always been the case, but it's just been generally the case that they work to negotiate. And negotiation is give and take. Now, that's my understanding. If you walk away from a negotiation and one side of the table feels they were forced or beaten into submission, that's not a negotiation. That is not achieving something with all parties involved, and everyone should walk away from a negotiation feeling that they've gotten something, that they wanted, and that you're moving things in a good direction. And when they don't, then there's going to be resentment, and that resentment is going to show up in the next negotiation and the next negotiation until it becomes a behavior. And I think that appears to be where we have reached at this particular point in our national politics, in that sides have entrenched themselves, saying that we have not gotten fair representation, or we've not gotten fair negotiations in how we've implemented things in our society. And so now everyone has, or I can say everyone, but so we're having to try to reestablish what is fair, what is a good negotiation. How do we not make everything your way or my way or the highway kind of negotiating process? It's interesting that there seems to be, and ideologically, there is these big differences, and that puzzles me to a point. And I don't know if that's a part of the negotiating process, which is why those ideologies are so far apart from each other. But if you understand what you're trying to achieve, and if both parties understand the goal of what you're trying to achieve and how to get there, then it becomes more about process than what you want to achieve. But it appears in our current political environment, it's more about what you want to achieve than how do we get there. So the ideologies are so far apart. So either we've not done a very good job of helping each other understand why we believe in the ideologies that we have, or we've just ignored that and decided that it's not about negotiation, it's about getting my way. And so I think role models should be there to help us see that getting things your way is not always going to be beneficial, and it's not always going to be helpful. And so I realize that adults now need role models. One of the things that disappointed me was Congresswoman Maxine Waters. She encouraged people to go after people that she disagreed with, and to harass them. And it wasn't about negotiating. It was actual harassment. It was actual making them their life unpleasant as a negotiation tactic. Um, Being a legislator is a job. Now, they are serving the public. They are there to serve the public, but it is a job. It is something that you're elected to and you're paid for, and results are expected of you. Along with it being a job, there is a work environment. Your work environment for the legislature, the national legislature, is Washington, D.C., it is the halls of Congress. It is not a service station. It is not a restaurant. Those are times when you are preparing to go back to work. And the expectation is that you handle work issues in the work environment. So it is not a 24/7 job where you are on call at any moment and are responsible for knowing the latest at any moment of the day. So encouraging people to breach the private public aspect of their job is of no benefit to anyone. It says that there are no boundaries, and that if I disagree with you, or if I don't particularly like things that you say or do, that I can express my anger, displeasure, distrust in any setting, any environment, anytime, anywhere, and almost in any way that I choose. And so I was really disappointed in that. Whether I agree with there are reasons for wanting to do that, it does not matter if the process is poisoned by doing things that are really unethical. And I think it's unethical to approach someone on their off time when they're trying to just live their life. They have doing the job does not make you doing that job does not make you 24 hours accessible to your constituents or people who have a political bone to pick with you. You have an office, you have a work area where you can work, and that's the appropriate time and place for that to be handled. So it's not a right or left issue, and I find it interesting that how we've divided politics. But one thing I think is important is that if we lose the human aspect of it, if we lose the aspect where that's a person that you're dealing with, and whether you like that person or not, there are people that you are not going to like in your job. But that does not give you license to treat that person without some form of respect or respecting that they have a personal life outside of work. And I think that it's important that we make sure that we don't do that. Now, Maxine Waters is a potential role model. She does have a camera and a microphone pointed at her, and her actions, her behavior is going to be looked at and picked over and analyzed, and someone someplace, whether her constituents or school-age kids who are going to become voters or legislators, are going to see that behavior. And as we've seen in things like precedent in court cases, people will go back to that. If you've done that, if we've said, attack the people that we disagree with in service stations and restaurants, someone maybe down the road, a few years or a few months, is going to look back and say, we did it then, why can't we do it now? So we have to moderate our behavior. And I believe people have to be held responsible for the things that they say and do. And for a while, there were several. I'm going to say a lot of. I try to be careful about that, but several people who openly said they don't want to be a role model. They they were professional figures, and they had microphones pointed at them, and they had televisions pointed at them, and they said, I don't want to be a role model. And the difficulty, I think, there is if you step into a role where there's a microphone and a camera or a camera pointed at you, and you make that conscious choice to be there. It is not about what you want. There is a certain level of responsibility that you accept by stepping into that position. You have a chance to make the choice to do something different. But if you decide to do that, then there are expectations placed upon you for doing that. Now, being a role model is something difficult because your life is analyzed and it is broken down, and people are trying to hold you accountable for a certain behavior, which you may not be accustomed to exhibiting, a behavior that you're not accustomed to putting forth. And you are going to stumble and fall on occasion. As we know that people, while we may mean well, there are many things that you can say or do that people would misinterpret. And when they do, you're going to take heat for that. And your explanation is not going to be believed because some people don't want to give you the benefit of the doubt. But that is a part of being in the public eye. That is a part of being in a position where a camera and a microphone is presented to you. And so there is that expectation. And one of the, I want to say, difficulties of being in the spotlight is that you are opened up to more scrutiny. And so we're in our politics, especially in presidential politics. I want to start with that one. Because of the nature of that position, because of the nature of the power granted to that individual, there is going to be more asked of that individual in opening up their life to scrutiny. So the more power or the more influence that you have on events that impact a larger group of people, the more likely people are going to want to scrutinize or examine your behavior. And so I think that people accepting those positions, actually, because nobody gets elected president without accepting running for president. So if you understand that, or congressperson, or House representative person, those aren't jobs you just get one day. You walk in and somebody hands it to you. You actually have to pursue that. So if you're pursuing that position, it comes with certain liabilities. And I don't want to call them liabilities. It comes with certain responsibilities as far as providing information, as far as providing access to yourself and to your life. And so I think it's difficult for someone who pursues that to then want to be off the radar, not live up to the responsibility to the people that they represent of giving certain information. And we all have different ideas about the information that we like to provide, that what we would like to see as public and what we wouldn't. Some of it's just pretty much when your life is opened up like that, there are things that is just going to be embarrassing. People are embarrassed by different things, and so I think it's interesting, or I think we have to be conscious of what we are asking of our representatives and what kind of information they do provide, so that we're not getting into too personal, but some personal things are necessary, and I can't think of necessarily anything at this particular point that we ask of our representatives to reveal that is so revealing or that is so personal as to breach some level of personal protections for that individual. So role models are important, and the people who step forward to represent other people, whether you acknowledge being a role model or not, you are. And presenting yourself in such a way in your negotiations, in your interpersonal relationships with people that you work with, is extremely important and needs to be considered before making statements or approving actions or espousing ideas about people and others, and realizing that it may go much further than you had anticipated, and other people may be emboldened who otherwise would not have been emboldened by your behavior. And we have to be conscious of, are we advocating violence towards each other in the process of trying to espouse our political beliefs and trying to achieve a more perfect union? When you have 300 million people, you're going to have 300 million different ideas and 300 different million ways in order to achieve those ideas. And force is not usually the best way. It has short-term gain and usually will unravel somewhere down the road. I want to thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. And I will be taking off the month of December. This is the last podcast until January. I want to thank you. You can always find my podcast on my YouTube channel. But again, thank you very much. I will be coming back at you in January. That concludes this episode. Now, the video podcast is available on YouTube. All you need to do is a YouTube search for Lions Den STL. And the audio podcast is available on Stitcher.com, Anchor.fm, the iTunes Store, and the Google Play Music Store. Please consider supporting the podcast by visiting Anchor.fm/altitude-adjustment2. The internet is powered by your likes, shares, and comments. Please like, share, and comment on this and other episodes because it matters. As always, be cool, be calm, but above all, be careful. Look out for the other guy because they may not be looking out for you. Happy holidays to everyone. I look forward to getting back with you after the new year.